What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hoop Stuff Podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, and today we're going to review the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft, and we're going to talk about a little bit about each player that was drafted. Some players we won't talk too much about because, especially since we get, when we get later into the first round, when we get to, 25 and past, we're not going to be talking much about those players because as you keep going, the players are, not as popular or they're just picked because the team has to pick, you know what I mean? So let's get right into it. The first overall pick belonged to the Carolina Panthers, where they drafted QB Bryce Young. This is a great pick for the Panthers because they were in desperate need of a QB. The franchise hasn't had a great QB since Cam Newton, I would say. Prime Cam Newton. Bryce Young could really get this team to a better position, and maybe soon he'll be a star. But I think that he needs that star receiver around him because right now their best receivers in North Carolina their best receivers in Carolina are Adam Thielen and DJ Chark, who are both okay, but they're not great, I would say. Bryce Young is obviously a great QB. He was a great QB in college. He won the Heisman Trophy in 2021, and he had a great college career at Alabama. Threw 80 touchdowns in 3 seasons, which totaled out to 34 games. With the second overall pick, the Houston Texans took QB CJ Stroud. The Houston Texans were another team in desperate need of a quarterback. So CJ Stroud was a really good pick, and I feel like he had the potential to be the first overall pick for the Panthers because I think, honestly, he might be a little better than Bryce Young. Sorry, I came to a blank. But they're another team who doesn't have, great receivers, I would say, but that could change, and they could become a playoff team within the next couple of seasons if they can get a solid receiver around CJ Stroud. But due to them not having any great receivers, I don't think he's going to have that great of a first year. Because, you need somebody to throw to have have a good season. But maybe they could pick somebody up in free agency next year, or they could end up trading for somebody. He was a great college quarterback, scoring 85 passing touchdowns in just 2 seasons after not playing in his first college season. He had 85 touchdowns. He had all 85 of those touchdowns in just 25 games, which is great. And I honestly think, like I said, he's better. I honestly think he's a little better than Bryce Young. Number 3, the Houston Texans had the third overall pick. Again, back-to-back picks. So they drafted outside linebacker Will Anderson Jr. Having back-to-back picks is great for the Houston Texans, especially since, in my opinion, they were able to pick up the best QB in the draft, and probably with this pick, the best defensive player in the draft. The Texans were not good at all last year, so they can use all the help they can get. Will Anderson was the second Alabama player to get drafted within the first 3 picks. And he played 41 games of college football, which came out to 3 seasons, and he had 204 tackles in those 41 games that he played for Alabama. With the number 4 overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts selected QB and Anthony Richardson. Richardson was the third QB taken in the first 4 picks. He was the third QB taken in the top 5, and for sure should be QB1 for this Colts team, who have no solid QB right now. They have Gardner Minshew and Nick Foles. He has a great running back with Jonathan Taylor, and Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman are both solid receivers. So this Colts team may have a solid season if Richardson can perform. He played 3 seasons in Florida, playing only 3 games in his first season, 7 in his second, and 12 in his third. He threw for 24 touchdowns in just 22 games, which isn't terrible at all, I'd say. With the number 5 overall pick, Seattle selected cornerback Devon Witherspoon. The Seahawks do have a very solid offense with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett for receivers, Geno Smith at QB, and Kenneth Walker at running back. But the defense is what really needs help, which is what this young man's going to help with. He's gonna get you some interceptions, play some solid defense on the solid wide receivers, like people like Devontae Adams and people that you just need to lock up. I think the Seahawks could be a solid contender this year with some pickups they made in the draft. The number 6 pick went to the Arizona Cardinals, and they drafted offensive tackle Paris Johnson Jr. Personally, I thought they were going to go with a QB in the first round, just with the possibility of losing Kyler Murray for quite some time, but instead they went with a great offensive tackle. Obviously, the only 3 phenomenal QBs went in the first 4 picks, but they could have traded up and possibly traded up their pick to get one of those QBs. They could have traded with the Colts or something. But Johnson played for 3 years at Ohio State, but he didn't touch the field the first year, causing him to play only a total of 15 games in his college career. The number 7 pick went to the Las Vegas Raiders, who drafted defensive end Tyree Wilson. After playing 1 year at Texas A&M, this young man transferred to Texas Tech, where he would play 3 more seasons. I don't believe the Raiders are going to be great, but I think Wilson could be a great defensive player for them. Wilson had 121 total sacks in 4 years and continues to get better each year. Those numbers just keep going up every year he plays, and he just develops more each and every year. The number 8 pick went to the Atlanta Falcons, and they selected running back Bijan Robinson. He is really going to put this team together because they have good young players right now, and he's just going to add to that. They have players like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Desmond Ridder at QB. He scored 33 total touchdowns in his 3 seasons, or 31 games, and he ran for 3,410 yards in those 3 years for Texas. I think he's going to fit in with this Falcons team, and I think they'll be good contenders, just like I said about the Seahawks. I think this Falcons team could be good contenders if those young players can just get to that next level and take that next leap. I really like Bijan Robinson, though. The number 9 pick was held by the Philadelphia Eagles, who drafted defensive tackle Jalen Carter. The Eagles may very well have one of the best defensive lines in the league with Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Josh Sweat, and then also adding Jalen Carter is great for them. He could have gone higher, but he did deal with some off-the-field problems in college. He's probably a contender for the best defensive player in the draft. And, the off-the-field problems were nothing too big, but just some minor off-the-field problems. The number 10 pick was held by Chicago Bears, who drafted offensive tackle Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright is really going to help this Bears team out a lot. With having a young QB like Justin Fields, it's really going to offer him more protection in the pocket to improve his passing game, because Justin Fields is more like a scrambler. We could compare him to somebody like Lamar Jackson, who's on their feet a lot running, and not more of a throwing type of player. He's a run first type of guy. But this could make him a better passer, because he's going to have more time in the pocket with this great offensive tackle in Darnell Wright. The 11th pick went to the Tennessee Titans, who drafted another offensive tackle. Back-to-back offensive tackles drafted. Peter Skoronski. I don't know how to say his last name, but it's Skoronski, I think. The Titans are another team who need a lot of help with this in this season. Last year they didn't have a great season, but this guy is going to give them the help that they need. Skowronski's grandfather played for the Packers, so that's definitely that's going to help Peter out a lot because he's going to have someone with great experience, like NFL experience, that could probably help him train when he was younger, told him what to do and stuff. Number 12 pick went to the Detroit Lions, who drafted running back Jahmyr Gibbs. I was very surprised the Lions went with a running back after they just got David Montgomery in free agency, and they drafted DeAndre Swift just a few years back. But maybe this means that they'll move on from Swift already, as he does deal with a decent amount of injuries, it seems like. But I do really like Jahmyr Gibbs, but I just don't think that he's going to get the amount of playing time on the field that he should. Just because like I just said, they have Swift, they have Montgomery, two great running backs. He is a top running back in the draft, and he'll probably end up as a backup for Montgomery or Swift. I'm assuming they're going to end up trading away Swift or putting him at third, because I think Montgomery has to be your running back one. Gibbs played his first 2 years of college football at Georgia Tech, and then he later transferred to Alabama, where he would arguably have his best season. So he's just an all-around great player. The number 13 pick went to the Green Bay Packers, who traded Aaron Rodgers, blah, 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 and moved up two spots in the draft. They drafted defensive end Lucas Van Ness. As a Packers fan, I was really hoping that they would pick up a tight end or a wide receiver with this pick, but they took Van Ness instead. It looks like he's going to be behind Preston Smith in the rotation anyway, so I feel like this was really a waste of a pick. Especially with Aaron Rodgers being traded, we are left with young Jordan Love at QB, so he needs weapons to throw to. And we did just lose Robert Tonyan and free agency to the Chicago Bears, so we don't really have a solid tight end right now. And obviously we traded away Devontae Adams not too far back, and we just lost Allen Lazard in free agency to the Jets. So Jordan Love has Christian Watson to throw to, Romeo Doubs, and then they just took this defensive player. The number 14 pick went to the Steelers, who drafted offensive tackle Broderick Jones. The Steelers haven't done much these last couple of years, and they aren't great. But again, having a solid offensive tackle, like Jones is really going to help with the development of that young QB, Kenny Pickett, and he's going to be able to develop his game in many aspects with being allowed more time to make a smart decision. The number 15 pick went to the New York Jets after the trade with the Packers. They swapped picks 15 for 13. And they drafted defensive tackle Will McDonald. And even after the Jets got Aaron Rodgers in a trade, I don't think they're going to be that good, because I think he's going to be that type of player like Russell Wilson was after he was traded to the Denver Broncos from the Seattle Seahawks. I think since he's been with the Packers so long, he's not going to be able to adjust to that new Jets roster. They have an okay receiving core over in New York, and they have a good running game, but the defense isn't really there. So even with McDonald, I don't think they'll do great on the defensive aspect of the game, but I don't think they're going to do terrible. The number 16 pick went to the Washington Commanders, who drafted cornerback Emmanuel Forbes. The Commanders are another one of those teams who they really need all the help they can get. I don't think that this will change much for them, but it might be a step towards becoming a good team. He's gonna boost your defense maybe slightly, but not much. The number 17 pick went to the New England Patriots, who drafted cornerback Christian Gonzalez. The Patriots don't really have many superstar players, and they have a mid-level defense, but this should boost their defense to a solid defense. They still need to work on their offense, but they could be good in a couple years. They have that young QB in Mac Jones, who I really like, and they have a young running back with Ramondre Stevenson, who did really good last year. The number 18 pick is another Detroit Lions pick who picked up inside linebacker Jack Campbell. The Detroit Lions are a mid-team. They aren't bad, but they aren't good. They're just all right. And they drafted Hendon Hooker in the third round, I believe, who hopefully will eventually help out their team a lot. But I don't think much is going to change for them in this upcoming season. The number 19 pick went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who drafted a defensive tackle, Calijah Kancey. Tampa Bay isn't going to do much on offense with Baker Mayfield at QB, but they already have a solid defense, so this is just going to boost their defense. But in my opinion, they should have tried to figure out a way to trade up to get a high pick in the draft for a QB. They could have possibly traded with the Texans for their 3rd overall pick, or they could have traded with the Colts for their 4th overall, because Baker Mayfield, we've already seen him play for the Browns, and he just wasn't a successful quarterback. The number 20 pick went to the Seattle Seahawks, who drafted wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba. The Seattle Seahawks are another team that I was surprised about who they picked. The Seattle Seahawks already have 2 solid receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And I honestly think that they should have taken Dalton Kincaid, who at the time was still on the board. He is a tight end. Number 21, pick number 21 went to the Los Angeles Chargers, who drafted wide receiver Quentin Johnston. And again, I think the Chargers have 2 solid wide receivers with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. But this is just going to be a third good wide receiver for Justin Herbert, and another solid option for him to throw to. This team has great potential if they can put those pieces together. Pick number 22 goes to the Baltimore Ravens, and they drafted wide receiver Zay Flowers. So we see 3 wide receivers in a row get picked right here, and this pick was a really good pick in my opinion. With the Ravens just signing Lamar Jackson for 4 more years. Like I've said multiple times in the past, Lamar Jackson needs weapons, and I stress this every time I talk to somebody about the Ravens. Lamar Jackson needs those weapons around him to throw to. Lamar Jackson needs more weapons to throw to because all of his receivers are mid, leaving him with just Mark Andrews at tight end, who is the only great option for him to throw to. I mean, sure, he has a couple of solid wide receivers, but he doesn't have anybody that's great, and Zay Flowers has the potential to be that great wide receiver that Lamar Jackson needs. The 23rd pick went to the Minnesota Vikings, and they pick another wide receiver. This is the 4th wide receiver picked in a row in the draft, and they picked Jordan Addison. The Vikings just lost Adam Thielen, who was their vet wide receiver, but they still do have Justin Jefferson, who is a phenomenal wide receiver, obviously. One of the best in the league. And so Jordan Addison should be a solid wide receiver 2 for them, unless they run KJ Osborne as their wide receiver 2. But I see them probably playing Jordan Addison over KJ Osborne, but KJ Osborne is a solid wide receiver 3. Number 24 pick went to the New York Giants, who drafted cornerback Deonte Banks. The Giants are a solid team on offense, but they could really use a little more on defense, so the Giants fans should be pretty satisfied with this pick because Banks is really going to boost that defense to where they need to be, and the Giants could honestly be a pretty solid contender this year. The 25th pick went to the Buffalo Bills, who are obviously a phenomenal team. They have Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, all on offense. They have Dawson Knox on offense at tight end. And on defense, they have players like Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, and so many more pieces, like just phenomenal players. But this pick was very surprising to me. They picked tight end Dalton Kincaid, who I was just talking about earlier. I was saying that he should have went to the I was saying he could have went to the Packers before. I was saying multiple teams that he could have went to. He could have went to the Seattle Seahawks with the 20th pick, but he went to the Buffalo Bills with the 25th pick. But they just re-signed tight end Dawson Knox, so it doesn't really make sense to me. Maybe they have plans to trade one of the tight ends away, but it just doesn't. Like I said, it doesn't make that much sense to me. This was a player I expected to go to the Packers or like the Seahawks, like I said, and that's because the Packers just lost Robert Tonyan. The Seahawks have Noah Fant, who is okay but not great. And so it was honestly just a really surprising pick for me by the Buffalo Bills, who could really use like a running back or somebody like that. Pick number 26 went to the Dallas Cowboys, who drafted defensive tackle Mazi Smith. Dallas has a pretty good defense already, so Smith should make that defense a little better, but not much since they already have one of the best defenses in the league, in my opinion. They have players like Micah Parsons, or like they have DeMarcus Lawrence on their line, so they have multiple good defensive players. Diggs for their cornerback, so they have great defense, and this is just going to add to that defense. Number 27 pick was the Jacksonville Jaguars, who selected offensive tackle Anton Harrison. And again, we see a team with a young QB drafted a few years ago that picked an offensive tackle in the first round. And that's, like I said, he's like this offensive tackle, Anton Harrison, is really just going to help that young QB, who in this case is Trevor Lawrence, develop. And he hasn't really had a great start to his career, but it hasn't been terrible. Trevor Lawrence did okay last year, but I think Anton Harrison is really going to help Trevor Lawrence out a lot. The number 28 pick went to the Cincinnati Bengals, who drafted defensive end Myles Murphy. The Bengals are another team with a pretty good defense, so Murphy might make them a little better, but won't affect them too much. This team has great potential, and I think they'll probably make it pretty far this year. The number 29 pick was held by the New Orleans Saints, who drafted defensive tackle Bryan Bresee. I don't know if I said that right, but Bryan Bresee, I think that's how you say it. The Saints also don't have a bad defense at all, but they could really use some improvement, so Bresee is going to be a good pick to accelerate that defense, and with all the other great defensive players around him, he'll be able to develop off of them, and like I said, he's going to help the team, and he's going to develop, so just by helping the team, he's going to help himself. Pick number 30 went to the Philadelphia Eagles, who drafted outside linebacker Nolan Smith. Philly added another solid defensive player to their amazing defense. Like I said earlier, they have phenomenal defensive line. And with this pick, they may be able to win the Super Bowl again. Or they may be able to go to the Super Bowl again. Sorry, not win the Super Bowl again. They might be able to go back to the Super Bowl this year if they can play at that same level that they did last year. And then the final pick in this draft was held by the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions, and they drafted defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah. The Chiefs' defense is alright, but I don't think this young man will affect it too much. I think they'll still be a big threat, but not much better than last year. They have a great offense too, which helps a lot though. That's going to be it for today's episode. I hope this helped you learn about some of these new young players that may be coming to your team this year. And if you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next Sunday on the Hoops and Stuff podcast.